All right. So I appreciate you being here. Welcome, everybody. Pop it up. We made it our way to our virtual space. My name is Rosalinda Mancillas, and I'm coming to you live from Sacramento, California, 916 Nissan on land. We're going to do a land acknowledgement towards the end. So if you get a chance to go ahead and look that up on the screen, I put in the Zoom chat. I'll also share it a little bit later. But I just want to welcome to the space. We're going to do some learning. A lot of it has different activities, kind of thinking about what does healing look like in 2023, what latest research is available, and what does that mean for us as individuals and collectively as a community. So I lead this training, my work with an anti-racism decolonization lens. We're going to talk a little bit about harm reduction, a little bit about restorative practices in between. But let's get to know each other first to start off our space. So I'm going to put you into a breakout room with about 3 to 4 people. And I want you to share a little bit with each other, just to welcome each other in. You're going to share your chosen name, including the pronunciation. I'm going to talk about why that's important. You're going to share the color that you feel, not your favorite color, but the color that you feel. And share a funny story from your childhood, YouTube worthy, 10,000 hits. Take it back to elementary school, middle school, high school. If you can't think of anything funny, feel free to share something funny about a cousin, a neighbor, maybe one of the kids you work with, being recorded, your own kids. And we'll have about maybe 3-4 minutes with the groups. The main sessions are always recorded. The breakout rooms are not recorded. So for folks who might not be familiar with that, just wanted to give that announcement. So go ahead, take a moment to think about it. What color do I feel right now? What is my name? Depending on how early it might be for you, you'd be like, who am I? The questions are also in the Zoom chat for you to take with you into your breakout rooms. Thinking. All right. Go ahead and take about 4, 5, 6 minutes with your team and accept your invite. The rooms should be open. Icebreaker questions. And for us that just joined us and maybe you didn't get a chance to see the icebreaker questions, they're inside the chat right now. What did you notice about those icebreaker questions, the way they were written that yielded the type of conversations that we had? What did you notice? Feel free to share in chat or on mic.
They might not be the most like broad questions, but they are answers that say a lot about people, even though they might be simple and not too complex.
Oh yeah, so they're general enough, kind of wide enough that people can gather and narrate their own story, right? But you learn a lot in that collection of sharing. There should be a lot of information that's you're coming from it. Thank you, Kathleen. Let's get a couple more. What else do you notice? Yeah, Araceli in chat said authentic choice. The name was provided, chosen name.
Yeah, I think for me, again, the chosen name is a big deal, especially when you're talking about cultural diversity. People see a name and they think that they know how to pronounce it based on, what they've heard or what they say in their cultures and their communities, and it's not the same. And name pronunciation has a lot to do with how our parents name us and why they name us. And so culturally, that's really important depending on where you come from.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful point when we think about the center of their work today is around healing, like being able to have that power, that agency to say, this is the starting point of getting to know me. And it starts with knowing how to pronounce it and what I'm presenting to you, right? There was another training where I did this activity and there was a staff member in there, and the staff member had revealed to the team that they actually had been mispronouncing her name for 1.5 years. And they were like, what? How come you never tell us? But she said, well, I've gone through this my whole life. It just gets me pronounced. I don't want to have to keep making people uncomfortable. And so like this dynamic, especially when you think about positions of power, what does it mean to have to keep retelling people? So from the get-go, if you make that part of the expectations, the norms. This is how we honor people. It shifts the way that people start treating each other. And I did this with a group of 6th graders, and you could see the 6th graders, this is live in person. They were like, wait, how do you say it again? And they're taking notes to listen how you're saying it so they can honor you the next time they say it, right? So the power of that. And I've had students, a high school program that I work with virtually every 3 months. We introduce new high schoolers from the Central California area. And the high schooler talked about, he goes by his middle name, and his high school teacher would not call him by his name. She said, well, I'm going to go what's on the registration. And he said it ended his participation in the year. He was done. If you're not going to talk to me, give me that respect, then why do I need to listen to you? So thinking about that, that's part of the honoring. That's part of what we think about being able to have that agency. Yeah. Let's get one more thing. What else did you notice about how the questions were designed that yielded the type of conversations you had?
The color kind of getting setting the tone for like who you are. I think that's super important, because some people might have been having an off day. Some people, you know, might be very energetic like yourself, and it kind of just allows you to better communicate with them, understanding like how they're feeling.
Yeah, how people are coming into the space, because sometimes it's difficult to articulate that, especially if you're going through something. It's hard to find the words, right? And so being able to think about color, and then I have to be like, what color do I feel? And then acknowledging that that can also flow, right? You might meet somebody and they lift your spirits, they lift your energy, they shift it for you. Maybe you match somebody, you notice that they're a little different. So that's also a really great social emotional like empathy piece to be able to tap into, that you're noticing somebody might be all a little off. And how do I check in with that? There's part of us. So part of my background is psychology, and I'll talk a little bit about my background around what's called third-party narration. And so when you could talk in a third-party space, like not me, but the color, it allows people to tap into emotions and the way to verbalize that in a different way. So using that as a great technique to help people talk, to be able to help talk with yourself when you think about healing and in communities. And it's also an important part of culturally sustaining practices. So go ahead and write that in your notes, culturally sustaining practices. And at the core of that is just for folks to be able to narrate their own story. You're cultivating access points for people to narrate their own story so that assumptions, bias, and prejudice is not put on you, right? So based on Pixar's movie Inside Out and many spaces in society, if one of your staff members or a student said, I feel the color blue, you might poorly assume that they feel what?
That they feel sad.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people mouth sad,
Yeah.
but they're on my, yeah, so sad or maybe like tired or something like that, right? But what if that student or that staff member says, I feel blue because I feel calm, I feel collective, right? And so that shifts then that whole narration of what that story is going to be. So really important to be able to put the agency, the power in the person's hands to narrate their own story, right? So motions and pieces like that. And then if you notice the questions scaffold, so they get a little bit more deeper as you go. So yourself, the color, and then the story. Somebody mentioned earlier, like the power of vulnerability in comedy. So there's that brings out a piece of yourself differently and what you think is different mine. And you get a window into somebody's background, culture, and experiences through those stories. And I've had folks where they got to the second question, but they got so excited that they kept going and they talked about their weekend plans. That doesn't matter. You're developing relationship, community, and that's what's more important, right? So I don't get caught up if my 7th graders never got to the third question. Not what it's about. It's not linear. It's about being able to process with each other. Right? And sometimes in those moments, they become best friends forever. And I was like, I did that, right? Nice. Thank you so much. Clap it up for each other. Very cool. All right, we're going to move on to our next piece, which is talking a little bit about what we saw. And if you're like, man, I wish I had this beautiful slide deck, no worries. You're going to get an access to this right before we leave. So I'm going to share it midway with you. So just for our clarity, inside the slide deck, what I've listed is different ways that what these icebreaker questions are doing, similar to what we've talked about already. So I just wanted to be able to have that for you on a slide. So that way, in case you were taking notes, you didn't feel like, oh, no, I didn't write everything down. I want to make sure I brought that to your attention. The next piece that I wanted to be able to talk about with each other is kind of why did we choose this session? And so this is the description of the session. I have kind of my curriculum and content but I want to be able to adapt it with things that you're hoping to learn or talk about today. So taking a moment with each other collectively as a community, when you thought about this session, why this particular session did you think you chose it? Is it something that you've been reading about, hearing about? Was there a part of the description that caught your heart, your eye, your mind? Let's get maybe 2 or 3, 4 folks to share either on chat or on. What made you choose the session today?
For me, working with high schoolers, I think that it's a transitional period for a lot of students and stuff. So I think just having the awareness that there's something deeper going on within them, that they might just be expressing it differently, and maybe just being able to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. Yeah, especially that high school age. That's a huge like transition, my connection to the world. And healing also works in the same way, but in reverse. Sometimes it's the small moments that kind of break through with that healing. And it's a process. And we're going to talk about that. Thank you, Andrew. Let's go ahead and get another person. Ooh, thank you, Joanna. Somebody said that the audio goes in and out for them. Is that happening for you all? Is it just one person? Let me know. And let's go ahead and invite Malika, and we'll have read Latoya's.
Thank you, Rosalinda. So I was looking at culturally responsive mindsets, and then I saw this one, and it was the healing through values to cultivate wellness and wholeness. One of the things that I enjoyed the most about how this symposium started is that it started with mindfulness and helping us get grounded and helping us get rooted. And so for me, working with a variety of children from different backgrounds, working very close to working close to indigenous land and having people come in that their culture and their values are not necessarily recognized. I put a big emphasis on celebrating cultural appreciation months and making sure that we don't do the standard things that we do, that we're not showing the same people and telling the same story, but going a little bit deeper and allowing the children. I'm working in elementary school now, but previously I was working in in middle school as a history teacher. And there were just so many gaps that had to be closed because the stories as they're being told miss a lot about indigenous people and Black people and other people of color. And so for me, being able to heal, like when I saw words like equity and decolonization, I was like, oh yes, this is it. We're not just talking about equality and inclusiveness and diversity. Like it has to go further than that, because, equality still looks like, oh, we're at the fence looking at the field and we're giving people the different boxes. And equity looks like taking the whole fence down. So that's why I'm here. I love doing this stuff.
Nice. Well said. Snaps and fingers. And we're going to talk a little bit too about mindfulness and how it's used in different communities, specifically with BIPOC, and being able to think about, like you said, how do we get to the root of pieces? It's not just what I can influence, but if we don't also shift the system, there's only so much I can do within that system that's operating against me. Right? Very cool. In chat, Latoya had said, understanding other values to help guide the middle schoolers I work with. Thank you so much. And Olivia, JK, Olivia was just responding to somebody else. Thank you. So that's kind of where I wanted to center us around, like, what does it feel like or look like to talk about healing? And sometimes healing gets caught up in the world of materialization, of capitalism, how it kind of sells you. You can go on Groupon to get a healing workshop, $29.99, and all will be done. So I want you to think about how the outside systems affect our perception of what healing looks like, and getting grounded into those values and the space of within honoring self and honoring community, how those two things can be kind of one and the same. And then we're going to talk about, last but not least, is really our values. So we're going to talk about before and at the end around how leading through those values is really how that healing can come out and live itself and get activated. Nice, very cool. So let's start with that in itself. So earlier I shared a story with you about my gambling career started at 5 years old, 4 years old, which is why I had the dice and the poker cards there. And I also have some pictures in front of you around different parts of my childhood. So on the left-hand side, it's a picture of me, I think about like 4 years old or so, and I'm wearing my dad's hat. It's his work hat. On the bottom, it's me in a Hollywood moment movie star. Probably about like two-ish there, maybe three. Lost track of all time. And in the space at the very top, you'll see my mom's hallway. So that's an actual picture of my mom's hallway. My mom's hallways in our house look very much the same. There's a lot of different pictures of a lot of different things. There's no rhyme or rhythm. It's just all there. So when you think about the story I shared and the pictures you see on the screen, what are some values that you think my family held high growing up?
I see faith.
Mm-hmm. Yes, faith. My mom grew up Roman Catholic. My dad grew up Catholic as well. But I would say the center of what we really grew up with was faith, believing in things that you may not know or see. My mom got very sick when I was 6 years old, and so we actually stopped going to church. And when I had asked my mom, my grandmother was worried, why aren't we going to church? My mom was like, well, church is with you, like faith of something that's not there. It's more like centering in you. So the belief of that comes on. I'm person, I didn't follow in the Catholic faith, but for me, faith is what I really took away from my mom. So today, like I have faith in humanity. I have faith in the things that we're building in our communities, the faith in our hands. Yeah. Thank you, Jim. What else do we see?
Strong
Take
family
pride in your
connection.
family. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Is it Kelly?
Yes.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I'd say like a strong family connection. I'm not sure if it's with your brothers or sisters, but looks like there's quite a few pictures with maybe siblings with you guys all around each other.
Yes, family was huge, and my family is a value, to the point where even my mom had like family day on Sundays, which we would have carnitas in the morning and watch football. Like that was huge. And then as a teenager, I didn't understand that. As an adult today, I understand why my mom did that, why she was centering us. And then on the walls, you'll see pictures of us hanging out together. Like we're always coming together in different times. My parents would always say, like, you are your siblings' caretaker, like you're responsible for them. So as much as it's about you, it's also about the people next to you, behind you, right? And as an older sibling, we have this responsibility and this knowledge, but we also have this responsibility to behind us, who's coming up. And then also family of like our ancestors or past. You see like my grandmothers, there's a picture in that corner. So my mom and family would talk about like who our people are, like grandmother, cousins, uncles, but then also like why it's important to know them, because we're standing on their shoulders, right? Very cool. Celebrating accomplishments, yes. That was huge. Accolades. We didn't talk so much about failure. That's a separate workshop. But we did celebrate accolades and accomplishments. And that was my dad's 30 years, I think it was, more or less, 30 something years with the service of the city of Sacramento he worked with. So that was like a part of it. And let's get one more. Anything else you see? One thing that I'll share. Oh, thank you. And as this is Steph, let us know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Art, yes. Art and creativity, I would say even as well. So that bottom moment that you see me being a Hollywood moment, my dad was raised in a Navy family. So he liked structure, he liked boxes. This is like against his heart. My mom was the creative one, like explore, be in the toys, be whoever you want. So we used to fight a lot around like how much exploring do I want to do? And then the art piece in the background, I was working in New York. And I saw that picture, it reminded me of my mom. We go back and forth around language. I say she is an artist. She says she was an artist. We're going to talk about why that's important, thinking about identity. But that's very much like her colors. Like she's like Care Bears is how I would describe her. I get a text in the morning, 4:30. Good morning, Mija. I hope the sun is shining. And I'm like, it's too early. That's how she's always been. So I saw that. Yeah, very cool. And then even to this day, so my mom's a sketch artist. I'm a graffiti artist. I do murals for schools. So the reason why I wanted to bring up about values is because in those stories that we shared, that we talked about, you hear a lot of information, including the values of what people see. So in that story that I shared about the gambling, right, the shooting dice, playing poker, something that was a high value in our family was that education happens outside of institutional spaces. And it's not always in the classrooms. And so my dad wanted to be able to pass that knowledge on from his life into ours as well. And that made us really interested in learning the numbers. And like, it was also a great connection piece. My dad worked 2 jobs, 80 hours a week. And so having 15 minutes as he was getting dressed, I'd bring my dice, I'd bring my dollar. And I was like, you ready, Dad? He's like, let's go, on the corner. And my dad would not hesitate to take $1 from a 6-year-old. And I was like, Dad, was that 7? And he was like, was it? I was like, I don't know. He's like, better learn to count faster, baby girl. And I was like, dang it. It took a whole week to save up that $1. So that was also a time for us to connect. And as much as my parents were working, my mom was at home, my dad worked 2 jobs. My parents were also activists in spaces where they were consistently demanding from the school, from community spaces and resources for us and their kids, but also for the community as well, which was a misconception around my parents, that because my dad worked so much, he might be these things. He was at the table in many different ways. And so being able to think about how does that activate a space within ourselves of those values and here. So whenever I work with organizations, so I work as a consultant, I redesign after school programs, schools, companies, and my job is to take people from where they are to the next level. I specialize in facilitation and culturally sustaining practices. And I do my work throughout the state of California, throughout the United States, and globally in Mexico, Costa Rica, Spain. I was launching in Puerto Rico when the pandemic hit, and getting ready to leave to Peru to work with indigenous youth in a few months. I like long walks on the beach, and I'm addicted to chocolate. That's Rosalinda box. And I'm going to share my information with you towards the end, because as much as I'm your trainer, I'm also your colleague in the field. So if there's anything I can do to help push your journey, move your network, move your resources, definitely reach out. So with this work, whenever I ask with companies, I ask them, what are your values? And I ask them to hand me their values when I get ready to work with them, usually posted on the website. And then I ask them, how does your actions and systems reflect those values? And majority of the time, there's a misalignment where they say one thing, but they're doing another, right? And so being able to think about, how are my daily life actions and systems, how are they reflective of the values that I lead in my life? So that's what I want you to do right now. I'm going to put on some music, and I want you to take a moment to research. I want you to go on Google. And there's actually 1,000 different values. There's so many values that a lot of people sometimes don't realize how many values are actually there. Sometimes one value will connect with you in a way that meets a different space, a different feeling. So I want you to take a moment, put the song on, and I want you to think about 4 values that are really important to how you lead your life. And I want you to go on Google type list of values, and it'll give you like websites, 250 values, 300 values, so that we can look through some of the language of, well, what does a value, what's the difference between integrity and these things, right? Choose 4 values in which way you lead your life. We'll take some time with some music. Feel free to go on Google, use those resources. All right, got our music on. We'll take about a minute or 2. Google. What 4 values do you feel like is the way you lead your life? All right. I'm gonna go ahead and take a moment. We're gonna go into breakout rooms. We could share the values that we chose. And then when we come back, we're gonna put all of our list of values together. And we're gonna take about 4 minutes with a group of 3 people or so to share the values that you chose. Feel free to share at least 1 or 2. Then as you have more time, feel free to share the others. About that process. So it doesn't have to be the actual values that you shared. It could be also about the process of being able to do that. What does it mean to have your actions and systems reflect your values in life? I'll go ahead and pass it to the community.
I guess I'll go. So with our group, we kind of had very similar values, and we noticed that even though it was different words, we still had the same like goals that make the kids better, and for us to also like check in with ourselves. So I know that's what we're mostly talking about with that. So just bringing it and making the kids a little bit, you know, like letting them know we are humans too, so we can make mistakes. So with everything, we got to check in with ourselves and do better as much as we can.
I was class back when I was in my earlier work. Tuesdays and Thursdays, they would clean up early. And I remember Giovanni was like, here, Miss Rosalinda, here's your sharpened pencil for you to take your class for your homework. And I was like, oh. And then Giovanni came at me and was like, that's so sad you're still in school though. And I was like, first off, Giovanni, you don't know about university, okay? It comes after kindergarten, all right? Calm down, Giovanni. But the power of being able to know me beyond my role as an educator, like I have this other parts of myself. I'm a sister. I love anime, right? I'm a big League of Legends player. I'm a one-trick Heimerdinger player. I love being online. That's part of myself is also the bedding of who I am, and it's not separate from who I am, right? And so that's an important layer, especially with older youth as they start making these decisions, especially within systems, right? Who are telling them to separate themselves, that they are not one or the other, right? So being able to have that values as that core, this is who I am, no matter who might be coming at me differently, I'm going to hold this piece of it. And when I talk with teenagers, I talk with middle school students, and I ask them, how does that decision reflect your value? Sometimes it gives them pause. Maybe it didn't, and it's a misalignment. Sometimes they're like confident. That is how it reflects your value. And I'm like, good, go for it then. I'm backing that. That's what it looks like. Thank you, Senya. Appreciate it. We'll go ahead and open it to the community, and if not, we'll have you, Senya, pass the mic to somebody.
To kind of play off a little tiny bit of what Yesenia said, it was interesting to, you know, be in a space with people that share the same value as you, but that value has a different meaning to them and who they are. So it's not necessarily like about the core value, but it's just what it means to them and how it's kind of very interesting to hear that versus what it means to you. So it was a good space to be able to like share that and actually like almost have that affirmation within yourself of, oh, this is what it means to me, but to other people, that's totally different in how they live their life. So it was very interesting to listen to.
Based on our background, culture, experiences, what does that look like? How does that get amplified outside in the world? Which is also one of the pathways for restoring after conflict is like, I may have this value that may have different higher value for you. Maybe you value commitment more than you value blank. And so that's why we had a misalignment. Or maybe I think of commitment in one way based on my background, culture, experiences. You thought of another way. And that's where we had that misalignment. And part of this decolonization lens is also thinking about how do we do that decolonization work within ourselves, right? How do we undo the poison of these oppressive systems that have been living in us and taking that hard look and that hard work in the mirror to say, how is it taking over what I have felt or what I know? Right? So important piece, especially as we go into our programming with our students, with our staff members as well. Which is why whenever I work with executive directors and they're like, I know that policy we just put out to not reflect our values. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to tell you? And they go back and they redo it because that reminds them. I say one thing, why am I doing another? Right? And it's a beautiful thing when I've seen executive directors completely shift their whole policy from an anti-racism lens and honor people and honor the work and honor what the knowledge that's being come in. So I do it in reverse. I work with the top level management to basically do what line staff have been telling them to do, I'm like, what did your line staff say? Great. Let's start on what they just said. That's our starting point. They've been telling you. So that's where you should have started. Very cool. Any other thoughts about the process before we move on to our next piece?
I enjoyed, I didn't get a chance to talk right when I went on, we were going back to our main session, but it was, to me, it made me kind of think about some of the other values that you don't think are values, that you would think that are more like characteristics of a person, or something like that. I would just like teamwork was a value or something. And I thought, oh, for me, it's just, you know, I'm a team player. I jump in, I would help anywhere, everywhere, because that's how I was raised and that's how I've always been. And that came down from my mom. You know, but I did it. So to me, I didn't look at that as a value. I felt that that was more of maybe my character, some of my characteristics. So it was interesting to, you know, to just listen to some of the others. And I was like, oh, that is true. Like now that I'm thinking about it, it is a value and something, you know, not just the part of that, not just part of you, but it is a value that is out there that you don't always think about.
Experiences in the world. And very rarely they might change, but they might shift as you grow and have more experiences, right? And the priority of those values shift. It's the prime example of when companies come to me and they say they can't hire staff or there's too much rotation, especially in the after school field. And I said, no, we had a labor revolution. If you paid your staff a livable wage, you'll have no problem getting staff tomorrow. If you paid your staff benefits and being able to say, this is what we want for onboarding you to make sure you're prepared for this job, you have no problem hiring staff. It's about being able to set those values and you want it to reflect it. And then also challenging institutional spaces. So when I go with, especially elementary schools, you'll see like character, responsibility, being able to keep things safe or take responsibility for your own actions, like thinking about how much that's about control versus it is around being able to let people live and breathe in their creativity, right? And then I always ask if people in power are saying one thing, how are you reflecting that, right? So when we talk about social emotional learning, that's great for kids, but I look at teachers who are creating harm for their students, not in that social emotional pieces, right? So how are we reflecting that? Malika, go ahead. We'll end with your comment.
That just came back around to what you said about systems reflecting our values. The word that came up for me, there were a lot of things that we said that we shared that I was like, those weren't words for me because they have now just become a part of how I function, right? How I navigate. But healing was one of my words as one of my core values. And healing for the students that I work with, so that they can see something different, but also healing for me because I came from something different and I need them to see that people who look like them and people who sound like them, people who are reflective of who they are and where they're from can do something that they maybe didn't see before. So for me, it was healing and education as core values because those things just tie in. So hearing you say words like misalignment and how things, you know, don't pair up. One of my other words is balance. And again, it's being able to see these words differently, right? Not just hear fairness, not just hear equality, but hear other words that have a deeper meaning, that are deeper rooted, that, you know, that are a cause for us to pull things out a little more and dig a little deeper and see, you know, what is the root of this and how can that be changed? So super inspired.
Yes, well said. The depths of those words, like the difference between deep and reservoir, right? Thank you. Man, I feel like we got a podcast going. Let's keep it rolling. Join us next Friday. Let's go ahead and share our next activity. So I want to hold us here. This will be a quick one before we jump into our breakout rooms. Nice. So I want us to be able to ground there because I want us to think about, again, moving into this conversation around what does healing actually look like? So moving beyond I need to buy a specific workshop or I need to buy a specific tool or strategy, or that is even this one-time thing that can be bought. It gets amplified in many ways and it's a process, and I want you to think about connection. So the way that you connect with your students or your program, being able to be authentic with your students, that moment is a moment of healing. That moment is a moment of reassurance. So when we think about healing, I have 3 different pictures. So there's going to be 2 images, and I want us to be able to find the differences between the 2 images. And the number of the differences listed on the right-hand side. So we have time to do about 1 or 2, and you're going to get the whole slide deck, so you get to list a whole bunch of them. So the first one we have is the street market, and this one has 7 differences. We also have lavender. Lavender has 7 differences. And last but not least, we have sushi. Which one or 2 would you like to do? Let me know in chat. Let me know in mic. Sushi, lavender, street market. Vote for sushi. People are like, it's lunchtime. I'm feeling it. I got votes for lavender. All right. I think we got it. All right. Let's start off with our sushi. There's 9 differences. Let's see if we can find it as a community.
Your first one is the sushi on top is missing on
the right here.
Yeah.
Yep. That is correct. We got one.
The one at the bottom as well is missing.
The
One
one
that
has
says
sesame seeds
poppy
and one
seeds.
doesn't.
Yes, sesame seeds. And then there was one more.
I want to say it's on the left side. What are those? Are they like noodles? Sorry, I don't eat sushi.
It's
So I don't remember.
icon in carrots. It's missing some carrot.
There you go. That's
Yeah.
Nice. And I appreciate you
Yep.
asking that, Christopher. You're like, I'm not familiar with sushi. Can someone tell me it's a noodle thing?
yeah. I appreciate it for helping me. Yeah, I really eat it.
There's more
The stripes on the raw salmon.
I was
right?
gonna say, yeah.
I heard salmon.
Yeah, the stripes on the raw salmon on the top, like left one.
Yes. Okay. There was like 3 more that came in.
More slices of tuna on the right than on the left
On the plate.
on the plate. Mhm.
Nice. That is correct. Dang, we're rolling on this.
How many is that?
5,
1, 2, 3,
6.
4, 5.
On the
Oh,
right,
the color.
on the right side, it's filling in the middle. One of the on the left picture.
Yeah.
Mhm. Any others? Bottom right, sesame seeds missing. Got that, Olivia. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 more, folks. This is the part where you're like, dang, we were on a roll. Why you set us up, Rosalinda? I will say that the last 2 are the most difficult. Most people find it the most difficult. I've done this.
The plate, actual plating is different. The actual plate.
Ooh, what
the
about the
pattern.
plate?
The pattern in the plate is different.
Yes, there's a little bit more sparkle on one than the other. Hey. People are like, dang, should I be watching kids? How did I miss that? Thank you. We got one more.
I don't see the other one.
Trey's like, I can't help everything. Hold on, Felix. Let me know if the community wants a hint.
Okay, I'm taking a wild guess. The parsley. I don't know. Like it looks. I don't know. That's the
Yeah,
only thing I
you're
can
like,
think of.
You're like, it looks off, right? There's
Yeah.
a little bit more parsley in one than the other. That is correct.
Oh, see, I thought that
Hey.
too, but then I was like, maybe it's in the bowl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like, we haven't touched the bowl yet. It has to be in the bowl. Nice.
This is gonna sound like kind of totally whack, but now as I'm really staring at this picture, if you go down where you circled the sushi with no like sesame seeds on it, there's 3 white dots that are on like the slab. The first one is not there because I've been literally like this looking because some of these I'm like, God, what are you guys seeing? I don't see any of them, but there's like a missing dot right there and it really tripped me out.
Yes. So you're not the first person to say that. That's not on the editor's list, but you are not the first person to say that. So we can send a strongly worded email. Maybe the editor got it wrong. But I always tell that to everybody, including my high school students. And why do you think it's important to point that out? That it's not on the editor's list, but you might be catching something. We need to send a strongly worded email. Why do you think I would tell my students that or folks that?
Because
Okay,
it's not
different.
it doesn't mean that they're wrong. It's just it's not on the list.
Yeah. So the system could be wrong. and therefore we need to change the system, right? So like highlighting that as a value. So you're not the first one, Kathleen, who said, wait a second, those lime dots. We will notify editors immediately. Nice. Clap it up. If I ever get taken, I want them all, you guys on the detective list. All right, let's go to lavender. Lavender, annotate. Lavender. All right, these are 7. Here we go. Last one.
So underneath the bowl, there's a flower leaf that's not in the other picture.
Right here.
Yeah, it's not on the other side.
Nice, nice, nice.
And if you look at the yellow button flowers, it looks like up here, or so here I'm putting my screen sharing it. At the very top corner, it looks like we're missing a section right at the top right corner.
Of the yellow.
Yep.
That is correct, Cami.
I want to say we're missing a part of the buds on the rosemary on the bottom. Oh, it looks like a rosemary. But
Yes, yes, and yes.
There's a piece of lavender at the top in between the bowl and the burlap thing that's not on the other side.
Yes.
On the top, in the pink flowers, I don't know what it is, but there's a couple of them that are missing, or there's one that's missing. Yeah,
That's
that one.
correct. There's 2 more.
In the bowl of lavender, is there less lavender on the left side than there is on the right side?
Maybe, possibly, honestly. We haven't counted. It's not on the editor's list, but possibly.
oh,
It just looks like the depth of it.
Strongly worded emails. Number 2.
Like it could be because of the way the thing is shoved in too, because it looks like they're 2 different lengths. That's what I thought too.
It might be the way that it's angled, the lighting, all of that could affect it. Yeah.
I am seeing one lavender that might be slightly more greenish than the rest of them on the right side.
That is correct. It's like a teal color right in there.
Mhm.
Some of us are like, dang. We got one last one.
An extra hole in the burlap on the right at the top.
That is correct. Nice. Come up for each other. Ooh. Man, detective work is a backup career for you all. Nice. So now that we've completed these 2, and inside the slide deck, I've given you a link to some more that are really cool to do with that family meetings. I do this a lot with my high school students, trainings, staff meetings, Friday night with friends and some drinks. So the link is inside. When you think about this right here, what do you think this activity helps us better understand about healing?
Different people see different things, different perspectives.
Yeah, there's different perspectives and there's different pathways, routes to healing, right, that can happen for different people. What else?
I want to say it allows us to work unanimously as a team to be looking through different lenses. That's not only perspectives, but also to like point things out. Like one person may see this, one person may see that, and we all come to agreement and everything like to work as a group.
Yeah, so sometimes healing happens not just as an individual, but sometimes in collaboration with community. Sometimes healing happens when your perspective is shifted and changed through the experiences of another person. Yes, a step in chat to different perspectives. Anything else we could think of?
Sometimes I think it's just merely insight. But there were some of the answers that came that I was like, are you sure? I don't even see it. And then I sit back and then once it's shown to me, then I'm like, you are so right. And so, it's not even just different perspectives, it's just complete insight.
Yeah, that moment that it sparks it where you see it and you feel it, right? So the insight, and then the power, Tammy, too, of mentioned of not just zoning in, but then also stepping back and seeing holistically, right? So being able to understand that healing can happen when you're zoning in, healing can happen when you step back and look at the larger picture, that it is a process, it takes time. It's not going to happen instantaneously sometimes. So when capitalism is on your shoulder whispering sexiness to your ear, you'd be like, no, capitalism. Sometimes it's about the quality and not the quantity. It's timing, right? And that power, that insight when your brain shifts, the neuron shift, you're like, whoa, I see it, I feel it, right? That's a powerful moment. So that's what I want you to think about when we start to think about the resources of healing in our community. We're going to be closing with our last couple activities to be able to talk about, well, if healing can happen in different pathways, it can happen in collaboration. What could it look like for each other? This is an activity that I share with my high school students, and healing happens in the same way where we're like pushing against the systems of what we've been taught. So this is a typical goal map. And I asked my group of high school students, I run this academy every 3 months. Well, what does, when you're doing your goals in your high school, like what's the typical goal map that you see your counselors give you? And it often looks like this, it's very linear. And I said, so what is step 1 in your goals? And they said, well, we have to graduate high school. Okay, what comes after that? Well, then we get into a good college, we pass the classes. Okay, what happens after that? You graduate college, question mark. I was like, okay, then what? They said, well, then you get your career. I was like, all right, get a job, get financially stable. And I was like, okay, then what? And they're like, start a family? I was like, nice. So this is what typically when we think about goals, when we're setting these goals, when we're setting our pathway to healing, sometimes it looks linear. And our job to, in order to decolonize that, to look at it from anti-racism lens, is to understand that processes don't happen in a linear effect. It's very much like a web. So I asked my high school students, well, what happens when you don't complete these tasks? And this is some of the things that they said. They said sometimes you don't meet the goal and you feel upset, you get disappointed in yourself because you don't feel like you accomplished it, right? The goal is actually a big goal that you can get more into detail with. So what this doesn't give substance to is that graduating college, getting that diploma, is actually a lot of other work that has to happen. There's 2 a.m. editing an essay. There's feeling frustrated. There's not understanding how to do the citations. What extensions do I use? And I think about that a lot when my parents with my brother graduated law school. They were more excited about the diploma and the graduation than they were realizing the work that went into that and the mental health that has to come with being able to work through that. Also the spaces that my brother was at. So being able to understand that these goals are actually split into many small goals, that you actually need to take smaller steps. Sometimes you need to take it slow, that it doesn't allow for individuality, that you start it, but then maybe you don't complete it. And what about sidestep options? Maybe I start something, but that's not for me and I need to go in a different direction. Where does that show that, right? I told my students that this is important because when you go through life, when you have a major life push back in your life, something doesn't work out. If you aren't used to those steps, what happens is you fall directly down. Versus when you're building up pathways for healing, if you go through something major in your life, instead of falling directly down, you have foundation that you could fall back on, whether it's community within the skills that you're building. So it's that fall isn't so hard, right? You can lean onto it and build up from that foundation. So I present to you a healing direction. So this is a web version of thinking about, well, how do I heal in pathways, right? So think of it as a direction. And this direction happens on a micro and macro level. And this is where I'm going to share with you first the presentation. Actually, let me do the reverse. I'm going to share with you this one because this is your actual tool that we're going to use this activity real quick. So this is the activity that you're going to download a copy for. Go ahead and take a moment to download a copy of that. You're going to need that for an activity. And then this is the actual presentation. I want to make sure I don't forget to give this to you before you leave today. So healing directions, think of it as like, this is the way I'm going towards, right? And it can happen on a micro and macro level. So micro is in the moment. What am I doing in this moment to heal? Macro level is systems in life. So something that I talk about that's important around healing is like, when you think about healing, it's not just about the things you're doing, but how are you changing the systems around you? So when I talk to site directors who they say, I wish I had more time, I wish I could get to know my staff more, but we're always moving. And I ask them to hand me their agenda for their staff meeting. And the staff meeting is back to back with items. And I said, where's your icebreaker? Where's your centering? Where's your moment to transition? Where's your closing the circle? And they're like, what? And they realize that they're the ones creating chaos sometimes. They're jam packing it so much. And again, that has a lot to do with capitalism telling us to go, go, go. So taking a step back and thinking about how are my systems reflective of what I want in this healing. And I put these on the side, anti-racism, decolonization, harm reduction lens, and I'm adding a link for restorative practices. And these links will tell you a little bit more about this work. So if you're not familiar with decolonization work, those are links that can help you get you started. The center of what I want to highlight is how ways that you're honoring yourself. And honoring yourself can happen in many directions. It can happen through exercise, through body connection. So knowing your body, how's your body feeling, like the things that you're putting in your body, the ground, right? Your sleep, your nutrition, the routines that you create for yourself, the spaces that you're in, what it looks like, what it feels like, the connections that you're creating, and communities. With connections, I added relationships, and that could be through partnerships, friendships, situationships, any ships in between, thinking about how is that reflected in this healing of my space. I also added ceremony. So there's a lot of power in healing like through a ceremony. So like honoring something that has been passed or gone, doing something as a form to be able to honor that. So it could be that you're taking a moment to light a candle and you're honoring and kind of thinking about the past of where that might be. Something that I did recently with a cousin is we took some pieces of some like a herb that she uses a lot in her healing practices. And we took that herb and put it in the water. And I told her I want her to feel the water. So anything that's sensory is really important for healing. So touching water, the coldness, feeling around the ground is really important. But doing that action, that process is part of a way to be able to heal. So ceremonies are really important and key that process. Is there any other directions for healing that you can think about? Oh, question. They said there was access, presentation, don't see it. Links of love, recent in chat, they don't appear. Are we having problems with the links? Everybody got the link?
It's showing up at scroll. You have to scroll all the way back up to the top of the chat. It didn't pop in order. It's like at the very beginning. So just scroll up and they're both there.
Nice. This is the activity. Thank you, team member. And this is the slides presentation. Thank you. So if you were to think about what other directions of healing that can happen, what else would you fill in some of these bubbles? So let's do this as a community together. What are some big categories?
Can you repeat that again, Rosalinda? I didn't hear it well.
What are some other directions that you can take towards healing? So sometimes people don't think about my sleep schedule and how much sleep I'm getting is a way to help honor my body.
I would add to that hydration.
You can add that to the nutrition, hydration.
Maybe having a daily routine. People kind of forget how essential kind of having a daily routine is, and grounding yourself in that way, in that sort of healing direction.
So routine, a structure to your former life. I talked to my brother about that, how he sleeps. And I told him, I want you to start developing a sleep routine. Like before you go to sleep, what's the routine you use to get your body ready for sleep? Because he was having a lot of trouble sleeping and kept thinking.
I want to say meditation, getting to know you listen to your own body, what it says. Well, that relates a little bit to body connection, but like sitting there and actually like saying like, okay, what's going on? Like, why am I getting this type of pain? What's going on? What's stressing me out? What's keeping me up at night?
Yeah, and really being able just to hear and take that time. And I'm going to put an asterisk towards meditation because I want us to think from that decolonization space. I went into a studio and it was, again, selling meditation for $29.99. And I was like, that's not what it actually looks like or feel like. There wasn't the process. They didn't talk about the history, the cultures, the content of it, the context, the complexity of meditation, being able to help honor the process. So being really mindful what it looks like. And then I remember I went to a school to do an observation. They were having the fifth graders do meditation. And the educator said, I'm going to shut off the light. Everybody put your head down. We're in meditation, 5 minutes. Oh, That's not meditation. So being able to think about how does this word meditation and mindfulness get weaponized against BIPOC communities, right? Being able to think about this process of meditation and mindfulness is an actual cultural practice. There's a lot of context to it. If I'm not teaching that, honoring that process, then I'm doing it a disservice. Like that, go ahead.
So I was just gonna tie into that, going back to daily routines and meditation and mindfulness, the importance of language. Because for me, it's been not structuralizing everything, because sometimes the word structure ties into the word institution, and that can be very disheartening and make people disconnect. So for me, it is helping people to develop daily nourishing practices. So again, the importance of language.
So not just nutrition, but nurturing self practices with that hydration language. Nice.
What about just like fun? Like, I'm a mom and I love when I get to go do non-mom things. I love being a mom, but I love non-mom things too. Going hanging out with your girlfriends, stuff like that. Like that recharges my battery on a level that I didn't appreciate until after I had kids.
Yeah. What brings me joy? How can I step into that space of joy in the different roles that I carry in my life? Right. Family time. Nice. Yeah, family could be that family born with, family chosen. Like, where do I find my community? Right? Where's my community time? With my cousins, there used to be a kickback. We used to have kickbacks on Fridays. That's where all the cousins used to come together. We just kick back, talk trash. Each person we bring stuff, kind of BYOB. But we talked about how that's a form of healing for us to move away from the days and what's going on in our lives and be able to reconnect as cousins. We used to switch each other's houses, but that was the power of us being able to do that. Stepping into what we had just talked about, like that language and self-talk. So this is the next step of the healing directions, is like that web of what direction am I going through. The way you can get more detailed is like commitments to yourself. So this is how I frame it, of healing pathways. In a pathway, you can go forward, you can go around. It doesn't have to be paved. Some pathways are just created by the community, right? So I want you to think about when you're hiking, there might not be a paved path, but there's a community paved path where it's made, right? So pathways are kind of there around between. So things that you could specifically do for yourself of those pathways of healing is getting connected to affinity groups. So being mindful of like, what roles in my life do I carry and how do I connect with people of the similar roles, right? So if I'm an older sister, if I'm Cherokee, Choctaw, Apache, if I'm a person who's a gamer, there's a Discord that I belong to that we play a lot of games to each other. So I like being able to hop in that Discord. So that's where like chat groups come in. There's healing circles, and there's a couple links that I'm going to share in the resources page where they specifically do healing circles. It's not led by a quote unquote licensed therapist, right? It's done by the community who takes a moment to lead other community members through processes and practices of healing. I added trusted therapist through therapy, and with an asterisk of what that looks like, right? Because therapy can work in many different ways. So the key of that is being able to trust the person that you're with. And I always tell folks, if you're not trusting with the person, switch them out, because that should be a space where you feel trusted, you feel vulnerable. Another pathway could be going to the gym, maybe a dance. Maybe I like going Friday nights at the club. Maybe it's a Zumba. Those are all pathways for healing of self. Poetry, and the one that I want talk could be interrupting the conversation. So let's say you're in a moment and you're giving yourself like this negative thoughts of this can't work, it's not going to work. One of the things that you can do internally, and this is separate than the system, right? The system is there. This is more like your sphere of agency, is interrupting the conversation. So in the moment that you're telling yourself this might not work, it can't work, asking yourself for evidence of the why. So interrupting, almost like a third person narration, you're interrupting yourself. So something that's important around is when you find things that are interrupting yourself as of today, thinking about where that past self or where it's coming from. So, for example, something that me and my brother talked about is growing up in a low income household, we struggle a lot with financial stability and security, even though we are in careers that have given us that stability. Sometimes we make decisions as if we are our 9-year-old self, and the 9-year-old self is worried about the financial instability. So sometimes we have conversations with that 9-year-old self and say, you're worried, it's okay, it's not the same circumstances. Well, all right, you don't have to buy 100 things on Costco. It's not going to get taken. You're okay. You can buy things in your space. Or having an opportunity to talk with a self. So something that I do a lot is sometimes I'm working and trying to do everything. So being able to be taken care of is something that was very hard for me. And that past self, I think about 17-year-old self who was going through a lot in my household. My parents didn't get all the resources they could to be their best self. There was a lot happening in my community. And so that 17-year-old go, I have to handle all the emergencies. Sometimes she still exists when people are trying to care for her. And so I have to talk to that 17-year-old self and say, it's okay, let them care for you. It's okay to be cared for, right? And I have to remind that 17-year-old that she's in a different space today than she was, right? One of the last ones before we get ready to head out, and I'll add these to the resource page so everyone has it, is the one that I titled the Issa Rae. I don't know if you're familiar with the show Insecure, but I think it's a beautiful moment of like how to hype yourself out, how to make sure you have hard conversations with yourself. So I did a link if you're not familiar with the show, but in that show, to call them on their stuff, whatever it might be, but they're having this moment of self-talk, of resources, email me as well. But different communities, a way you can find healing with each other. So this one I started already is Healing in BIPOC Communities. There's another one that I'm going to link with a very sensual about being in the water. And so being able to feel like what it does in your neurons in your brain to be able to float in water. And floating in water specifically with somebody who's holding you. So she does that with families and couples as a form of healing with communities. So that was just like another example. But I'll pause there. At the end of the space, there is my information. So if you ever want to have a link, you want like Rosalinda would love more resources. If you can send me your way. Again, I'm not just your trainer, but I'm your colleague in your field. So feel free to reach out to me. I'll pause, top it up for each other. Thank you for joining us. Before we head out, is there anything that people want to share as like something that they learned or an appreciation for the space? Feel free to share in chat or on, let's take at least 2-3 people. And this will be while Julie gets ready to navigate you towards the evaluation shortly. But something that you appreciate or something that you learned or took away, maybe realigned your learning.
I definitely feel realigned. I honestly forgot about the symposium today, and I was going to take a day off because I was not feeling well. But this has absolutely helped me. I think just that word healing and everything that you built around it, I'm so greatly appreciative of that. Sometimes, especially the wellness and wholeness part of it, because sometimes we hang on to stuff and we let stuff build up and we don't realize it and our body starts shutting down because we haven't dealt with it. And so I just feel healthier than I did when I started out my morning. So Olivia, if you're still around, got a little bit more yellow in my circle now.
Nice.
That's all we needed. That's all that we're looking for.
Very cool. Araceli said it was a pleasure pleasing to revisit values. Thank you, Araceli. Let's go ahead and get one more person.
I'll go. I think the whole comparing the two pictures together is just making us aware of like paying attention to different details that we might not see everything the same from the same point of view. Sometimes you have to look a little deeper than just the surface of it all. And then the whole value thing was important too, because we all have our own values and some of them are the same or similar or have different meanings to us. So just being able to see that perspective of it.
Nice. Thank you. All right, clap it up for each other. If you want to stay on a little bit, you had a question or you want another comment, feel free to stay. Again, definitely I encourage you enough to reach out to me if you want more resources, or even if you're like, hey, Rosalinda, can we do a kickback Zoom session? Just like pretend like we're at a coffee shop? Yes. So whatever you want, whatever I can do to help you support you on your journey in your network, you let me know. Including inviting me to parties, because I'll go, I'll show up. I'm that person. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. Have a beautiful day. Change the world, no pressure. Continuing the healing.